Well, it's almost that time again. Maybe where you live, it is that time, the magical time, the October, November deer season. Across the country, many folks live for this time of year. The annual deer hunt means so much to so many. Whether you hunt solo for that direct communication with the outdoor world, or with your best buddy or friend, or wife or son or daughter, or aunt or grandma, whoever, wherever, there's just so much rich feelings to be gotten from a hunt. It's more than just getting your meat. It's more than just getting out and working with the tools that you've been busy zeroing, sighting in, and getting ready for that deer hunt. I don't know how to exactly explain it. If you're a deer hunter, you will understand. There's just absolutely something magical about the annual deer hunt, whether it's whitetail or mule deer. And I would suspect that by now some of you are already out there, have already made some hunts. Maybe you've gotten your deer for the year. Maybe you live in one of those states where you can get multiple deer. But maybe you're just like me, still looking forward to getting out there for one or two hunts. At any rate, I thought it might be kind of fun to reflect back on one of my more memorable hunts, in which I took a pretty impressive deer. Now, this is a podcast, so I'm not going to bother showing you a lot of things, but folks like to watch this on YouTube, and I can show some images on here. So what I would like to do is show some photographs of this deer. Part of them will be from the field when I actually took it, and some maybe the taxidermy mount that I see now in my office every day to remind me of that glorious October. Well, actually this one was in November. But I thought you might enjoy the story. It might help resurrect some of the wonderful memories you and your family have of deer hunts. This one was pretty much a solo operation, although I had the pleasure of hunting with the landowner. It was actually the wife of a team that were managing a ranch, and it was a good-sized ranch. Looked more like mule deer country than whitetail country, but it had lots of big whitetails on it. And I pretty much had the run of the place. But the rancher's wife really enjoyed going with me just to be outdoors. She didn't hunt, she didn't shoot, but she just enjoyed scouting for deer, finding deer, and watching the whole operation. And I could certainly understand and appreciate that. So she and I set out to find a big buck, and the rumor was that there was a big 6x6 whitetail. That is not a common size, so I was set to find it. And we went out looking in the usual places. Now, on this hunt, I glass a lot because it's big, rolly grasslands in Kansas with some deep canyons and some thickets of cedar, or red cedar as they call it there, and some cottonwood trees and a lot of plum thickets and the usual brush that you see growing up these days in the plains states. But also a lot of big grass fields and a few relatively small crop fields that seem to draw those deer in. You know, any time in the fall that you have some good green crops planted, whitetail and mule deer too just sort of gravitate to those. And I think it's because they have been on dry feed for so long. The hot, dry summer gets a little old and wearying on them, and I think they're looking for anything fresh and green, and that's usually an irrigated alfalfa field or a brand new, newly planted and just sprouted winter wheat field, and that's what we had here. So we routinely check those places and glass to see what sort of deer are using them. And we did not find that big 6x6. Hard though we searched, could not come up with it. But that was just the first day. So on the second day, we were back at it, glassing those big fields in the morning and then looking into the tighter corners as the morning wore on and the deer hiked off those fields and got down along the creeks and the rivers and the brush tangles and such. It's just a matter of finding that deer before you decide whether to stalk and all. So we were doing that. Now, the cool thing about this hunt was that it was the one and only time I ever hunted Kansas in which I was allowed to have 2 buck whitetail tags. Never before, never since. And I had already hunted in a different part of the state where this extra tag was legal, in eastern part of the state where they had too many deer, too many accidents on the highways, and were trying to reduce the population. They had gone about it wrong, as far as I'm concerned, because they allowed buck tags. What you want to do to reduce the population of too many deer running across the roads and crashing into cars, of course, is to reduce the doe population, the females. Nevertheless, since they allowed me to get an extra buck tag, I got one. And I enjoyed a heck of a nice solo hunt there and took what anyone, I think, would consider a fine whitetail for the season. It had a beautiful, beautiful high rack that scored, about 148 inches, as I recall. And it wasn't so much the rack as that actual hunt that I really remembered and enjoyed, because it was snowing heavily when this thing came ghosting through the timber on the opposite side of a draw from where I was sitting under a tree trying to stay out of that snow bit. And it was a magnificent animal, and the steam was coming off of it. It's probably, I'm remembering, it's roughly 150 to 200 yards away. But what really stands out for me is the way it pranced into view. It was in full rut and just looked like it was full of itself, looking for some does, and it came prancing in there with its head up high and its neck swollen, and the steam coming off of its body because it was running so hard and heated up, and the snow was melting as it fell. And it looked around alertly in several directions coming through those trees, and it just struck me that this was one of the most magnificent stags I had ever seen, out there doing his thing, completely oblivious to anything else in the world but his duties in the fall rut. And it was just a no-brainer. I put that little rifle up, and this is another reason the hunt was so special for me. It was a single-shot Dakota falling block action chambered in 25-06, and I put that up, put it on his chest right behind the shoulder, and got him with one shot. And it was just, the whole thing was magical. It condensed the hunting season for me into one time. It must have been like 10 seconds at most. But I remember all of those seconds and that whole process, from being under the tree, getting rained on, getting fairly wet, seeing that buck and the steam coming off and all the rest of it, and making the shot and just finishing that hunt in that one condensed moment. It pretty much spelled deer hunting to me. It took me back to when I was a boy hunting in the snow with a 30-30 and getting my first deer, and many others after that. It just was the epitome of a deer hunt. Well, back to this big buck. The next day things dried out, and then I went further west in the state where it apparently hadn't rained at all or snowed. And this is where I'm going to be now hunting for this big 12-point buck. The rancher had seen it and talked to me about it, and when he said he saw a 12-point buck, he saw a 12-point buck. Even though he wasn't a deer hunter, he really knew his deer, and while he's out managing his cattle and the usual ranch chores, he'd keep his eyes open, and he would notice these things throughout the summer. He would see it in velvet, growing its antlers and all. He knew there was a big buck out there. Wide antlers, really, really wide, and long main beam, and 12 points. Ooh, so that's what I was looking for. So his wife and I were out doing all of our hunting and scouting and looking for this buck and could not find him. And there were a couple of other hunters on the property at this time. And of course, as I suspect everyone would feel, it's like, they're going to get my deer. I've got to get there first. It always adds an element of tension to the hunt. I wasn't too freaked out about it, but I was a little concerned, especially when I saw that they started driving a lot of the pastures in their vehicle. And I always dislike that because, I don't know, it just seems to me that when one has an opportunity in open country like this to glass and find deer and stalk them and hike over there, it's just a part of the hunt, a part of the challenge. And driving around to spot a deer, to me, just doesn't seem like the right way to go about it. At any rate, I was a little concerned that they were going to get the big one before I did. I don't know, it seems kind of silly now, but this was a long time ago. So at any rate, we were out glassing, and again, we did not find him that morning. We were seeing some really nice deer, but not the big guy, and here were these other two hunters driving around. So that evening, when we set out, once the deer wake up, move out again, you're going to see them moving around and all, that's when we went out. It's probably around 2.5 to 3 hours before sunset. So we split up, and she went to watch a draw, a big, big, long draw with many finger draws leading into it, little side draws and such. And I went, a few hundred yards away to look down another one. And they both fed down into a big creek valley. And those were sort of the transition routes that these deer took from the thick cover up to the feed fields behind us. And I had barely gotten settled in when I heard her whispering behind me, hey, a big buck. I think I found a big buck. Already? We just got here. But I trusted her because, like her husband, she really knew her deer. When she saw a big one, she knew it. And she had a binocular, so she'd seen this big buck and thought I should come and take a look. It might be the big 12-point. So, of course, we both hurried back over to her perch above that draw, and then I asked where it was. Well, now she's a little bit concerned because she's confused about which tree it was under. It was under a big tree. Well, there's several of them out there. Which one was it? I don't know. Start looking under all the trees. I know exactly what happened. She saw this big buck in her binocular as she was panning around and got all excited when she saw it. And instead of looking at the rest of the terrain and the habitat to nail down exactly where it was, and then lowering binocular to get a normal view of it to say, okay, it's to the left of that draw and to behind that rock and that sort of thing. She just kept it in her view until it was time to get me, dropped the binocular and ran and got me. Well, things look a lot different when you get back and you're not looking through a 10x binocular. But no big deal, because it was a part of the challenge, again, is to find that deer. So we both started glassing all of this big canyon. And when I say big canyon, it wasn't all that deep, but it was pretty wide, and it had a lot of brush pockets and such in it. So it was a bit of a challenge to find a little gray-brown deer out in all of this autumn foliage out there. Lots of grass and gray brush and stuff. But it was obviously a fun challenge to look for him. Glassing is a big part of the hunt. So we were both glassing, and it took us a while, but finally saw a flicker of movement, and a doe came out of a thicket, and here came the buck right on her heels. Oh, yeah, this was obviously a big one, and once I saw it, I locked down that location and then immediately grabbed for the tripod with a spotting scope on it to really size him up to see if it was a 12-pointer. Well, when I looked in the binocular or in the spotting scope, I did not see 12 points. It looked like it was a 10-point to me. And like 5x5, nice, good mass, good width, good everything. It just looked like a nice big buck, but not that 12-pointer. So I asked her, is this the right deer? Take a look. And she looked and said, I don't think so. I don't think that's that big 12-pointer, but it's pretty big. Well, I couldn't argue that. And the sun was now getting pretty low already. And I thought, well, I had better get closer because he's down there courting that doe, and they may stay down in the bottom the whole time rather than go up to the feed fields. So well, I better get closer. Why don't you stay here, keep your eye on him, let me know where he goes. If he gets away and such, we'll have a bit of a clue on where to go if we've got any time to pursue him. And I'll work my way down there and see what I can find out. So I did not take the spotting scope at this point, left it with her, but I did have my binocular, of course, my rifle. The rifle I was using was then, well, it still is, one of my favorites. It's an ultralight arms, Model 20, short action in .284 Winchester. Fairly uncommon cartridge. Not a lot of people know it all that well. It came out in 1964 when Winchester was trying to recreate the ballistics of a .270 Winchester in a short-action cartridge. So the .284 Winchester started with the same rim diameter, and the body diameter was different. The rim diameter was .270, but the body diameter was a ½ inch. It was a fat. Really, it was the first short fat Magnum. In later years, of course, we got all the WSMs and the short action Ultra Magnums, and now the 6.5 PRC and those sorts of things. But back then, it was really new and innovative, but it didn't do very well. And the reason, I think, was mostly because of the rifles they chambered. It was the new autoloader from Winchester. I believe it was called a Model 100. And then a lever action, a modern style lever action along the lines of a Savage 99 with a vertical stack magazine so you could shoot long pointy bullets and all. Neither one of those rifles took the world by storm. But the cartridge was really pretty darn good because it had the powder capacity to pretty nicely match up with the 280 Remington and or the 270 Winchester. At any rate, it was one of Mel Forbes' favorites for mountain rifle, and that's what this Model 20 ultralight arms rifle was designed for. Lightweight mountain hunting, great precision, and weatherproof and all the rest of it. So what it was a synthetic stock and a medium contour barrel, not super light, but not real heavy either. But it was bedded in that synthetic stock to give it more rigidity instead of having it free-floated. And it worked. It was quite accurate. And with the 284 pushing 140 to 150 grain bullet, I was getting velocities up around 2,900 feet per second or so. And I could depend on that thing for some pretty accurate point-blank range shooting out to about 300 yards. And I had used it in previous years to take mountain goats and sheep, elk, mule deer, so it was proven. And I just loved it because it fit me and all of you out there who have a favorite rifle that just feels like it feels like the deer hunt is underway just when you pick it up. Brings back all the memories and it feels absolutely right in your hands. That's what this thing was. Weighed less than 6 pounds with a sling on it, fully loaded, 3 rounds down in a blind magazine. And I was ready to rumble. And I just had a lot of faith in that thing because it had worked so well for me for so long. That's what I was carrying when I sneaked down this draw to get closer to this buck and his doe. And I found a little side draw or channel cutting down in it that would cover me. Once I got into that, I was able to crouch without my head sticking up and get down near the bottom where the big flat was. And when I got there, I eased up over a bank and I took a look. He was still out there with this doe doing the courtship ritual. For a whitetail, courtship involves keeping up with the female and waiting for her to be ready without scaring her away. Because if she starts running and leaves a scent trail, every other buck that comes across that scent trail is going to get on it, and now you've got competition. And she likes to run until the fastest buck can get her by him and herself. They're on their little honeymoon away from everybody else. And that's what these two seem to be doing. No other deer around. And he didn't want to spook her. So he was very patiently staying behind her. She would take a couple steps forward and nibble a little bit. He'd take a couple steps forward. She would take a few more. He would take a few more. He wanted to get closer, but he knew better because she was probably going to take off running if he pressed it. So as I am watching this, they're 350 yards away was my estimate at the time. Didn't have rangefinders in those days, but I thought, it's a little bit far. I've made some 350-yard shots with this setup, but I had better let him get a little closer because she was coming closer. Remember, the feed field up on top was behind me, so I figured that's where she was going, but because the rut was on, she wasn't just walking right up there the way they usually do. She was taking her time, courting along with her boyfriend right there. So I thought, well, I've still got a little bit of daylight. I'm going to let them come. So I let them work toward me very slowly. I'm set up. I'm across the dirt, essentially. I'm not prone because of this cut bank I'm leaning over, but leaning against that cut bank with the rifle supported by the roll of hill on top of it, I was pretty darn solid. So I just needed to wait for the deer to get closer. And the closer, the better, because it's harder to miss when they're closer unless you get buck fever. And I didn't seem to have any buck fever, but actually the reason I think I didn't, because I wasn't yet convinced I was going to shoot this big buck. And when you see the pictures of him, you're going to say, what were you hesitating for? Because he is a magnificent 5x5, but he wasn't that 6x6. Remember, I had dreams in my head and visions of this 12-point whitetail. How many of those have we ever seen? So I was kind of hesitant. So I'm looking him over as I'm waiting for them to come in, and I'm sizing him up because he's looking right at me, and I can figure about 17 inches inside spread with his ear tips. And then where does the rack stand to that? Well, it's beyond that a little bit. And I add it all up, and I think, boy, he's probably getting there towards 20-inch inside spread maybe. And then I'm looking at the main beams when he turns his head, and I see how far out that main beam comes in relation to his nose. Then I'm getting a feel for the length of the main beam. And then, of course, all the tines, I've counted them and counted them again and come up with 5 plus a forked brow tine. This thing's got a lot of character and good mass. He just everything anybody would want in a whitetail. And I should probably shoot him. But he wasn't a 12-point. So I continue to wait to let her come close. I'm going to really, if I'm going to shoot this guy, it's going to be perfect. Well, before perfect happens, the doe runs away. I don't remember him stepping too close, but for some reason, she suddenly threw her head up and dashed off and made a bit of a circle U-turn and went back the way she had come. Now they're getting farther away from me, and they run into a plum thicket. Deer in a plum thicket. Now, what am I going to do now? I can't even see them, and the sun is setting, and I am going to run out of time. What shall I do? I waited a bit, and I thought, you know what? They're probably not going to come out of there, because what the does do is they like, when they're not ready yet and that buck's getting too close, they like to lie down or get in some heavy cover where he cannot bother them. So he's probably standing in there nearby waiting for her, and she might not get up for another half hour or an hour or who knows when. I'm going to have to make something happen. And this is the important thing for all of us deer hunters to know when to hold them and when to fold them. Most of the time we like to be patient and wait, and that usually works out the best. But there are times when you have to take the bull, or shall we say, the buck by the horns or the antlers and make something happen. And that is what I decided I needed to do on this one. That buck was probably going to hang in that thicket, and I would never see him again unless I made a move or it was going to get dark on me. So I decided to throw caution to the wind and walk directly toward that plum thicket across a wide open grass bottom in this draw. And I figured if I don't pull it off, oh well, he wasn't a 12 by 12 anyway. And if I get really close and I get a good shot at him, maybe I'll take him. So I just walked across. And of course I was ready. I had the rifle ready. I had my shooting stick so I could get into those really quickly. But the deer didn't show up, and I began to wonder if they had somehow slipped through this thicket and escaped somewhere, but they had to go up a hill, an open grassy hill, and I was sure that I would have seen them. So I continued walking straight toward this. When I got within about 100 yards of that thing, the doe blew up, came out of that thicket, got up on the grassy hillside, stopped, stomped her feet, looked back. The buck was running right up behind her. He was still thinking she was running away from him. He had no idea I was there. Based on his body language, I'm just reading it. And he had that typical look of a rutting buck staying up with the doe. But when she stopped on that hillside, turned to look back at me and stomped her feet and then snorted, you know, whitetails, they all know those are danger signals. And the instant she snorted, he turned, didn't pause, didn't look. He just turned and went right at a 90-degree angle back down that canyon. And he was thundering. I mean, if you've ever seen a fully mature buck with a massive body, they're no longer that lithe and gentle, springing, dancing whitetail bounding through the prairies. They're like a bull charging through that stuff. And that's what it was. It was just like a bull or a train engine almost, just moving out as fast as he could go with his tail down. No flipping up the tail or anything. He knew there was danger and he was going to get away. So now I've got to make a quick decision. It seemed like it took a long time, but as he's powering away, I'm still trying to decide whether I want to shoot him or not. And my brain is just going round and around. I should wait. I got plenty of days to do this. But there are those other hunters. They might have already shot the 12-point. What do I know? And if I didn't, maybe they'll get him tomorrow morning before I get a look at him. And this is the best buck I've ever seen in my life. I should probably shoot him. If you can imagine going through that scenario in your brain while this big buck is running away from you, you'll know what I was up against. To this day, I can hardly believe that I did that. But I did. And there was an unusual calm that came over me while this was all happening. And I think it was because I was still thinking, I'm going to wait for that big 12-pointer. But as I'm watching in my scope as this guy is thundering away, I'm thinking, he's almost running dead away from me. Really, all I have to do is hold a shade off to his right because he's moving a little bit to the right as he's running. And I could launch that shot, and he's going to run right into that bullet. And that's when it happened. He ran right into that bullet. I can't even remember thinking, absolutely, I am going to take this deer. I just remember bang, and he rolled up and lay there. Well, now I'd done it. I'd shot the wrong deer, so to speak. So I walked over there, of course, and I put a finisher in him because I had broken his spine going away like that. And there he was, a magnificent animal. Just the body bulk on him was, he was pushing 300 pounds, I would guess. Just a massive animal with incredibly heavy antlers, beautiful all the way around. And as I was admiring him, Phyllis started down the hill to come up with me, and I began field dressing that buck. So when she got there, I was pretty much done with that chore already, and she said, "Wow, what a buck, what a buck." And I said, "Yeah, but it's not the 12-pointer. She about slapped me. She should have too. Oh, man. This is not to say I was not tickled spitless by this buck, but, it was, okay, I've got the best buck of my life, but it's not the big 12-pointer that's been advertised. Can you believe that? Oh, man. I was so spoiled in those days. Probably still am. At any rate, it got dark. It got dark here really quickly. So we started hiking out, and we didn't want to go back in the draw and up and over all the cuts and different things. We thought we knew where the closest ranch road was, and we headed for it. And and in the dark with our flashlights, we had a heck of a time coming up with that trail. And we finally found it and got back. And by then, our husband was a little bit concerned about why we were out there for so long. Had anything happened, and we finally got back to the ranch and told him, no, we'd shot this buck right at the edge of legal shooting hours and gutted him out and did all the work we needed to do, and he's still lying out there, so we need to go get him. He said, well, hop in, let's go. Took the flatbed, drove out there. Took us a bit of searching to find him, lying there in the open grass, and he put the headlights on him, got out of the truck and walked up to it and looked at him and said, couldn't wait for the 12-pointer, could you? So I knew I had done what I thought I had done. He really had seen the 12-pointer. And, of course, I'd figured all along he really had. I never did see that 12-point buck that year, and no one else got it. But the next year, I took Betsy along, and we saw it. We didn't get it, but we sure could have if we'd had the right tags. What had happened was this ranch had gotten a little bit overrun with deer, and the rancher said, I appreciate you coming out here to hunt deer and all that. Not a problem, but I'm getting too many deer, and you guys all shoot the bucks. Somebody needs to trim this doe population down for me. So I thought I would do my duty, help the guy out, and shoot some doe. And that year, they were giving out 2 doe tags. I don't think it was for the price of one, but the second one may have been a little bit less expensive. Not that they were expensive at all. But Betsy could get them, and I thought that'd be a great way to introduce her to whitetail hunting. She was hunting mule deer, but not whitetails. So she went along. We each had 2 tags for whitetail doe. So who do you suppose walks into our life? Mr. 12-point buck at about 50 yards. Oh, I was just, I don't know if I was sick, but it's pretty close to it. I mean, I recognized the opportunity I had looking at that buck because most people will never see a deer of this quality, of this size. It was a fully wild deer, not a managed whitetail ranch or anything like that, just wild country. And we were sitting on a sand hill watching some draws for the morning, and we didn't even see does. It was really kind of depressing because there's usually deer everywhere. It was like, what the heck? And we got off of that walking back to the car, and when we were going along a little side channel grown up with some willows coming up out of the bottom, we saw antlers walking You could just see the antler tips going along the top of those willows. And Betsy said, "Oh, there's one." And oh my goodness, there was mass on those tines like you can't believe. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, look at them all." I says, "I wonder if that's that 12 point." And about then he came up out of those willows and got up on that open side hill and stopped about 50, 60 yards away and looked around. I don't think he had seen us yet, wasn't spooked. Oh my goodness. I'll bet he had a 24-inch inside spread. His main beams were probably reaching 30 inches, and he had mass like an elk, but he didn't have tine length. He had really short tines, 6 on each side, but still, I think he would have probably made it into the Boone and Crockett records just on the mass and the length of the main beams in the spread. Because the tine length just wasn't there. But regardless, that was a deer of a lifetime. And here we both are standing about 50, 60 yards away with rifles loaded, ready to go, and doe tags in our pocket. And I didn't even have a camera. In those days, I used to carry a camera with me, and I kind of got tired of lugging around a big 400, 600 millimeter lens and all, and just decided we're just doe hunting, and I'll just leave it behind. Oh, what a picture that would have been. Magnificent deer. So there, in 2 seasons, I had 2 of the most memorable deer sightings of my life, and I was able to take this magnificent animal. We'll show the pictures to you guys. Probably already flashed them up. I'm not sure how we're going to put this together. But that rack on that deer, we taped it out. A friend of mine was a official measurer for Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, and he measured that thing out. If I remember right, it came in at about 189, the gross score. But then when you take deductions for one tine being a little shorter than the other and it having a forked brow tine, I think there were forked brow tines on both sides, that actually detracted from the score. So he came in netting 179 6/8, which is 1/8 of an inch under the book for Boone and Crockett. Ask me if I care. No, this just is a magnificent deer, and it's just a treat to have him up on the wall where I can look and think about that whole hunt anytime I want. Every time I look at him, I remember that glorious November and the hunt we had and the shot that I made and the good folks on whose ranch I was hunting. The whole thing was just about perfection. That sums up what I think deer hunting for all of us probably is. So whether you hunt in the swamps of the southeast or the thick conifer forests of the northeast or in the Midwest cornfields and woodlots or in the prairie states like I mostly do, or even in the northern forests of Idaho, Washington, up into Canada, whitetail hunting is whitetail hunting, and it's magical for not just the magnificent deer, but the time of year in which we hunt them, when the rut is on and they're in their prime condition, they're fully grown and fat and sassy from a summer of feeding, and they're moving a lot. You see them all day. They don't just sneak around a little bit at dawn and dusk. So you get to see a lot of activity. They're just magnificent animals. And then there's the habitat, the terrain in the habitat that for us, for most of us, is something new and special every year. We may be in town doing our jobs. We're at the plant, the factory, the shop, working in the office, and dreaming of getting out into what I like to call the real world, the hunting world, the whitetail world, the woods and the meadows and the special places that we only get to see for a few short days or weeks every year as hunters. And I think it gives us something to look forward to, something to live for beyond the ordinary, whether we're sharing it, as I said earlier, with our friends and family or doing it by ourselves. We're just, I like to say, you're sucking the marrow from life. And when you make that connection with nature, you get out there and really see, smell, hear, feel, endure sometimes, and enjoy the incredible beauty and that whole basic atavistic experience that our human population has lived with for how many generations upon generations upon generations. And to think that in this country, North America, as settled as it is and as fully modern and high tech as we are these days, we can hark back to yesteryear and relive what our forefathers discovered so long ago. And that's that intimate connection with nature, after which you bring home a rich, all-organic meat supply to help feed your family for that year. It just keeps us grounded. So I don't know what your deer hunting stories are, but send those in if you'd like to in the comment section. I get some really interesting stories from you folks, and we're always interested in reading those, and some of them we will read to you online. You don't have to make them as long-winded as mine just was. But let us know what those are, and maybe we will read some of those in another podcast coming up. Mostly, though, I would just urge you to make sure you get your tags and go deer hunting this year. Sometimes I think we're tempted to skip a season because everything isn't exactly perfect for us. The conditions aren't just right. But I always hear from people who say, I wish I hadn't missed that season. It is really important, since it only comes around once a year. I think it's really important to make it happen, even if you have to take your kids out of school to make it happen. Take a day off from work or a week off. Bring your wife along. Bring your favorite uncles or friends or grandma or anybody, and make the most of it. Suck the marrow out of that experience, and I think it will make you a better person, and probably make your family a little more closely knit, even if it's just bringing home the bacon and telling the story to the kids or the grandkids. It's all a rich, rich tradition that I hope we can continue for many more decades to come. So this is Ron Spomer. Thanks for listening to my deer hunting story. I am looking forward to hearing or reading some of yours. So send those in, and we'll see you next time. Hunt honest and shoot straight.